Hello ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Right Opinion, the home of a twat with too much free time. And YouTubers. Although there are certainly a lot of them to choose from, many would at least say the largest creators on the platform are comparable to the everyday Hollywood celebrity. This seems increasingly accurate as the platform continues to manifest and evolve larger and larger channels, headed by figures who have become identifiable to even those without a passing interest in the video hosting website. YouTube isn't like the mainstream media though. Many figureheads are not hand-picked, and many have much more centralized control of their content and their vision than certain personages who may be subject to studios and investors. For many, this is what makes YouTube such a good platform to launch one's career, as success is almost exclusively decided by the audience who watch it. However, on the other hand, YouTube is still a very small tranche of media as a whole, and many who achieve the treasured status of mega influencer often begin to look beyond the realms of the platform to further their career. In many ways, this should be a recipe for success. The personal relationship that many creators produce with their channel often gives them a fan base much more dedicated than that of the average celebutante. They've already crafted a multi-million subscriber channel from a very limited set of resources. Imagine what they could do with the sort of financial backing that many of these large corporations can provide. Think of all the wondrous creations that could be brought into being.
The pirates are dead!
It's strange really, because in spite of the numerous attempts to bring popular YouTubers into the mainstream sphere, a proportionally low number have actually succeeded. There are a few large musicians and comedians who had their start on the video sharing platform, which makes sense in a way as there are also occupations which can command an exceptionally dedicated fan base. But besides this, many creators trying to spread their wings have often been met with limited prosperity outside of their comfort zone. Why is this often the case? Well, to be honest, I don't think it's really a problem with the YouTuber themselves. As a matter of fact, many mainstream celebrities of the younger generations have been revealed to have possessed YouTube channels at some point, even if they weren't particularly lucrative in their time. It tells me that the same sort of star power that can drive a mainstream celebrity can also drive many large YouTubers. I think the main problem is rooted in the fact that many ventures by popular creators into mainstream media seek to capitalize on their YouTube success without being sensitive to the format that it's being adapted to. Although they may not seem particularly different on the surface, a good comedy on YouTube works for very different reasons that a good comedy film works, and the sort of 5-second humor that lands here may well fall flat elsewhere. A lot of YouTube comedy thrives on spontaneity and randomness. If you want to translate that into the world of established media, you still need infrastructure that supports it. Additionally, the contrivances of a lot of entertainment content tends to subdue the appeal of the individual creator, whose personality is often placed at the forefront of their online work, but may otherwise fall into the background amongst elevated production values. It's not that creators can't work in the mainstream world, it's just that the mainstream world often doesn't know what to do with them, and the medium often isn't supportive of it. But what's the answer to this quandary right in front of us the whole time?
A queen beats Jack! Is that your mum? What the fuck?
Late night talk shows are one of the leading forms of media, particularly in the United States of America, where figures like Jimmy Kimmel, David Letterman, and Conan O'Brien have been immortalized by their eponymous programs. In the past few years, it has also found significant popularity on YouTube, with clips from the broadcast garnering billions of views between them. Its standalone segments allowing for easy rendering to a site built on that sort of content. Although the subjects are likely planned, prepared, and researched, there is an impromptu element that allows the host to rip, with shows integrating sketches, interviews, and audience interactions, all of which coast off the charisma of the presenter. Its success on YouTube had already been proven, but what happens if we reverse the formula and put a YouTuber in a talk show?
Don't be dumb. This is what they do, okay? At front of store, they put glittered things to distract dumb girls like you, okay? Oh my god, look at those shiny pots and pans.
This is where we introduce today's title character, a YouTuber by the name of Lilly Singh. Lilly Singh was one of the most prominent YouTube-cultivated comedians of the 2010s. Her sketches, often garnished with commentary, became adored by many viewers for its ability to portray everyday experiences in an accurate yet amusing fashion. She would regularly depict fictionalized figures, including her overbearing conservative parents, and integrate her experiences as the second-generation daughter of migrants to Canada, contrasting their traditional values with her exposure to Western culture. This resonated with many around the world, and in the space of a few years, racked up her channel over 10 million subscribers, becoming one of the most subscribed to channels in the process. With such fame, further opportunities followed, many of those expected for someone of her influence. However, probably the most notable and well documented of those was her role in the pioneering show A Little Late with Lilly Singh, which planned to take her brand of YouTube comedy to a whole new level. With proven results and a format that should nurture her talents, it seemed like a match made in heaven. However, it felt like as soon as it started, it was over.
I believe in the show because NBC believes in the show, but most importantly because you believed in this show.
In spite of the promising premise, the show was nearly immediately marred in criticism, controversy, and COVID. And after just 2 seasons, it was dropped from the ever-rotating roster of late-night shows, ending another YouTuber experiment with somewhat disappointing results, and leaving the question of the compatibility of YouTube's success hanging in the balance. During the show's runtime, many creators and critics alike attempted to point out exactly what didn't work about this show. But now with its fate sealed, I think we should revisit it and ask that question one more time, to see if we can work out exactly what went wrong. And to do that, I suggest we start with the person who made it all happen in the first place, Lilly Singh. So folks, without further ado, let's jump right into it. Wow guys, it's summer already. Gee, it's come around fast. Well, call me Nelly because it is hot in her. All this sun is making me reconsider my life choices, such as my daily routine. Maybe you should reconsider your life too. And think about ways to spruce it up. Have you noticed that you smell? You know what also smells? Well, now introducing Scentbird, my new favorite brand of all time, at least since my last video. When I go shopping looking for all my Gucci and Prada, my gold chains, cashmere sweaters, and my grey poupon, I'm always on the lookout for the finest colognes. And I'm not talking about cities in North Rhine-Westphalia. However, all these bottles are so large and want to confine you to one long-term relationship. What if you want to sleep around? Well, Scentbird has you covered. They allow you to try up to 3 travel-side, designer, or niche fragrances for just $17 a month. $17! That's like 0.00056 Bitcoin. Or for all you normies out there, 0.0088 Ethereum. Scentbird has all the designer brands alongside cool other niche perfumes like Saltaire by Skylar, which really captures the airiness and saltiness of an atmosphere with a degree of salinity.
God damn it, Mom! You died in the first 3 seconds! You worthless piece of shit!
The amberwood tinge sign you're at you by Mercedes-Benz, which captures the flavors of a man who always lives life in the fast lane and always keeps 12 points on his license. And the subtle spice of number 1, David's perfume by David Dobrik, for whenever you feel like a number 1. I'm sorry, ladies. Please control yourselves. Don't mind me, friends. I just put some David Dobrik on me, and now everyone's getting excited. Huh. Wait, where did they go? Anyhow, I know I said $17 a month earlier, but I'm going to make you a deal. My friend Mr. Scentbird has been talking to me, and he said that for the first month, he's going to give you all 55% off. Can you hear him too? Well, all you have to do is use my coupon code, Right Opinion, for 55% off at Scentbird and a little over $7 for your first month. Available in the US and Canada, because folks, if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense. Scentbird. They smell good.
Didn't even break a sweat.
Superwoman. Today I'm going to teach you how to tie a side roll-up bug, or at least my version of a side roll-up bug. And before I warn you, I'm not an expert by any means, so if you have any tips on how I can improve, please let me know because I would love to better myself.
Lilly Singh created her channel towards the end of 2010, with the first presently viewable upload being a tutorial on how to tie a turban. Now, it's not the first ever upload on her channel, we'll address that in a bit, but I think it's understandable why she has left this up as the first upload. Although obviously very different to the content she would subsequently garner fame from making, it represents a degree of cultural pride and integrates Lilly's more outgoing personality into the content, with a description that sets up Lilly's purpose in the creation of this video, observing that there aren't a lot of tutorials that can deliver information in a helpful way, and so she decided to fill that gap. When Lilly first launched her channel, she tried a few avenues of content. There was music, including piano covers and rap remixes. There was some serious commentary, and there were vlogs. Now, none of these performed particularly badly. As a matter of fact, viewership was pretty consistent throughout the channel in its early stages. However, the best performing video was a comedy one Lilly had made titled Stop Punjabi Madness. And not too long after, she decided to take another shot at the funniest stuff, uploading a video named Official Guide to Brown Girls.
Today I'm going to tell you, welcome to Superwoman's official guide of how to deal with brown girls. So hold on tight, because you know it's going to be quite the emotional roller coaster. What's cooking good looking?
Obviously, much of its production value was very apt for that of 2010, but it has personality. And even if some of the humor is very much of its time, it's rooted in that trademark relatability that she'd soon become known for. Additionally, even if a punchline or an edit didn't always land, there was no lack of comedic ambition, and it demonstrated that Lilly was prepared to throw the kitchen sink at the wall just to see what stuck, which can be a real asset to honing in your craft. After its publication, Official Guide to Brown Girls quickly garnered significantly more views than any other video on her channel at that time, possibly giving Lilly a hint to what the masses wanted, and so she obliged, uploading more sketch-based comedy to her channel in the coming months and years.
I swear to God, you have one job and that's to be sucky. You can't even suck. You make the worst slut ever.
Now with Lilly, there was no overnight success, particularly in the world of sketch comedy, which was already saturated by the early 2010s. Plenty of channels dominated the airwaves, and it was hard for any creator to put their foot in the door. But growth was steady, and enough of those who found her channel decided to subscribe and stick around for her content. Playing the waiting game isn't necessarily a bad option in this case, as it gave Lilly a time to improve her skills and creative direction, improving viewer retention and subscriber conversion. This eventually began to pay dividends, particularly around the year 2013, where her content began to be treated very favorably by the YouTube algorithm. Starting the year on approximately 170,000 subscribers, she finished on 1.86 million, the sort of growth that many creators can only dream of. By then, Lilly was producing highly polished videos that captured the energy of her humor while remaining sincere to the subject matter. She had fleshed out characters, running gags and social commentary from a defined persona that commanded a large fanbase of dedicated viewers. Maybe people asked exactly how she did it. Well, we already spoke about her appeal as a second-generation daughter of migrants, but I think it went a little deeper than that. In the early 21st century, the age of the internet was dawning in many countries, which were certainly not used to having such contraption at their disposal. The internet gave young people in their formative years a lot of accessibility to ideas and media that they would never have had the chance to appreciate without the World Wide Web. However, a lot of this media came into very significant conflict with values held by older generations, those whose perspectives had been formed and cemented a long time ago, and who probably did not interact with that sort of media well. The conflict was the source of tension in a lot of families, and was very much documented for its time. In Lilly's case, her exposure to Western culture was part of growing up in Canada, but all over the world, with the increasing access to the online world and social media, people were having the exact same experiences, ones that were encompassed by Lilly's content. In a 2012 interview, when asked about reasons for starting her channel, Lilly replied, "One inspiration was definitely the fact that there was no female doing it, particularly an Indian female doing it." Lilly was right in a way, although it's obviously an exaggeration to an extent. There were female comedians who uploaded to YouTube, and some who had accrued considerable success doing so, such as Jenna Marbles. Nonetheless, the lion's share of the market was controlled by male-led channels. It's nothing against those channels, but there's only so many people you can appeal to from that angle that many of those creators were making videos from. If Ian and Anthony from Smosh began to upload content on what it's like to be a brown girl, I think viewers would be understandably confused. But for a long time, people would interpret that lack of representation as a lack of demand in a certain market. Yet by the end of 2014, Lilly's channel, II Superwoman II, possessed just shy of 5 million subscribers, over 80% of whom were female, with many likely from a diverse range of ethnic backgrounds. Those sorts of statistics spoke volumes. Nevertheless, Lilly's successes were also being recognized outside of her subscriber count. 2014 brought her nominations for both the Shorty and Streamy Awards, collaborations with renowned celebrities, a multitude of interviews where she detailed her background and rise to stardom, and regular guest spots at popular conventions. Topping off the year, Singh appeared in the 2014 Rewind amongst many of the platform's then largest creators, cementing her status as YouTube royalty. It was clear that on her current trajectory, she was destined to be one of the website's leading lights. However, someone of Lilly's ambition was never going to be merely settled on what she had, and heading into 2015, it was clear she had greater plans. In her time as a content creator, she had appeared in a few films and music videos, particularly those in Indian media, which although not major, definitely reflected her desire to expand into the mainstream industry as a whole. As early uploads on her channel showed, she had always had the hunger for all types of creative content, and now she was about to fully realize it. Lilly Singh was about to go global. In the space of a few years, Lilly Singh had built a YouTube empire, but it's clear that she wanted more. And who could blame her?
I'm gonna take you all on a trip to Unicorn Island with my first ever world tour!
The thing about YouTube is that success is fleeting for most creators. There are exceptions and likely people who will remain on YouTube for a rather long time to come, people who enjoy their work here. But for many who want more from the entertainment world, YouTube is just the start. This was definitely the case for Lilly Singh. In March 2015, she embarked on a world tour called A Trip to Unicorn Island, which integrated her various talents and interests into one comprehensive performance. Now, tours are certainly not out of the ordinary for a creator of her size, however, she also decided to chronicle this circuit with a documentary feature film, which shared its name with the tour itself. It was released the following year to mixed reviews from critics and audiences. It was likely well received by her devotees as a raw glimpse into the person behind the entertainer, including covering the struggles of content creation. Throughout the year, she began to win awards and receive more coverage from various mainstream media outlets. She won a Streamy and an MTV Fandom Award and made the top 10 on Forbes' highest-earning YouTube stars of that year. This was the perfect time to eye up Hollywood, which was exactly what she was doing. In a 2015 LA Times interview, Singh stated that she intended to move to La La Land by November. She doesn't state why, but I think we can make a reasonable assumption it wasn't for the affordable housing. Come the new year, it's what she had done, and not too soon after, she began to increasingly appear across the entertainment industry as a whole.
Some movies coming out.
I do. I have a cameo in the new Ice Age movie where I play two unicorns. I'm like exuding unicorn Misty.
Hey.
Yeah, Misty and Bubbles are their names. And then I have a cameo in the Princess upcoming movie called Bad Moms where I play a mom. So I'm playing baby unicorns and a mom.
Something in your wheelhouse, something out of your wheelhouse.
You know, gotta explore.
With Lilly's success, it wasn't hard to understand why she was so sought after. She commanded a large fan base who would readily watch whatever she was credited just to point her out. She had a proven record of being able to hold her own as a performer, and she was some of the hottest product on the scene at the time. However, Hollywood was a very different can of worms to YouTube, and whereas Lilly was one of the largest influencers at the time on the video sharing platform, she was still a relatively small fish in Hollywood. Many creatives had pioneered the industry before her, and her experience, although no less inherently meaningful, was set against an industry full of people who had already broken the ground that she walked on. YouTube had been around for just over a decade. Hollywood had existed for over a century. With this in mind, although you'd certainly be impressed to read a repertoire of her media appearances, she never made any performances that felt particularly memorable. Her roles weren't derisory by any means, but they didn't represent that guarantee of longevity that so many budding stars aspire towards. One of the most promising prospects was an NBC show by the name of Bright Futures, which was set to have Singh and another YouTube breakout star, Jimmy TRO, playing young friends all attempting to realize their careers. Unfortunately, this was scrapped not too long after it was conceived, serving a rather bitter blow to those involved. We'd seen it before. A YouTuber goes to Hollywood, manages a few minor speaking roles in studio productions, and then mostly fades away when the novelty of their presence wears off. And after the first few acting roles, there probably were those who wondered if Lilly Singh would be assigned to the same category. But there were signs this wasn't the case.
I love who I am, and that's when I decided I'm a boss.
Yeah.
In March 2017, she published her first autobiography, How to Be a Boss, A Guide to Conquering Life. Going off the synopsis, it looks like a crash course in fulfilling Maslow's pyramids of needs. However, that's not necessarily a bad thing, and a lot of people seem to agree, buoying itself to the #1 spot of the New York Times bestseller list. She hosted a successful world tour to promote the book, all while continuing to work on her projects for a YouTube channel and beyond. Although she hadn't quite defined her career yet, it felt like she was on the right trajectory. I'd say the most important aspect of her status in Hollywood was that of a public figure in general. As her old content had layered more social commentary than a lot of her contemporaries, she carried more social clout than a lot of other YouTube figures who had tried to change lanes. Her history of being outspoken regarding many causes, including mental health, the treatment of women, and the representation of marginalized groups in media, had garnered her the reputation that she could be a good ambassador for many noble causes. It meant people often wanted to listen to what she had to say, and her success only emboldened this observation. In 2017, she became a UNICEF Goodwill Ambassador, a role occupied by celebrities such as David Beckham, Katy Perry, and Jackie Chan. Singh's role specialized in advocating for children's rights, and she addressed the United Nations the following year.
Now, getting to where I am today and achieving this level of success was not easy. But when I compare myself to the circumstances of what the majority of young people face, to be honest, I feel like I practically won the lottery. I got to receive an education, I got support, I didn't have to face obstacles such as poverty, conflict, or failed institutions.
She also used this authority to represent the online world and their often divisive sense of humor, particularly in countries that weren't necessarily the most free speech oriented. It was clear that Lilly meant business. She began to acquire a fair few roles that didn't necessarily rely on comedy, but more on her own natural self and background. She collaborated with Smashbox Cosmetics, Calvin Klein, Ardennes, and Pantene, just to name a few, and appeared alongside many other famous females in Maroon 5's song Girls Like You. With creators from the world of YouTube, there was a sense that many just wouldn't translate into being engaging celebrities, and sometimes that was the case. But Lilly was a departure from that. Her roles in film and TV didn't seem like they were going to make her a star in their own right, but as she became more ingrained in Hollywood culture, her status as an outgoing person who could hold a friendly conversation but also deliver some strong social messaging provided her with a different kind of appeal, one that did transcend most fleeting pop culture bullshit. With that sort of brand and the proven success that had come with it, there was a genre that seemed like a good fit.
Welcome to the Late Late Show, everybody.
Let's talk about it. Talk shows are a genre that I've addressed before. Although I focus more on the daytime genre rather than night, they do share a lot of similarities, so I don't want to repeat myself too much. However, besides the obvious aesthetic differences, I'd say late-night talk shows play off a stricter blueprint than a lot of their daytime counterparts. Now, there is variety, and each late-night host has their own personal flair, but most played a pretty safe game as long as the numbers they pulled were satisfactory enough. Another key difference I'd say about late-night talk show hosts is that many of them leaned into social commentary more heavily than the daytime counterparts. Being able to dispense an opinion on a controversial matter was becoming increasingly sought after, especially in a world where current affairs were becoming more and more emotionally provocative subjects. In the past few decades, the media industry in general has increasingly diversified its roster of figureheads. However, with a few exceptions, late-night talk shows have mostly remained dominated by a very specific type of person. It's also important to note that many of these hosts have been on the air for over a decade. And although there's nothing wrong with the media stalwart, by the end of the 2010s, there was a huge untapped demographic, as a majority of younger generations were consuming content from sources outside of cable TV. Now, late-night talk shows had long held their own on YouTube. As a matter of fact, Lilly Singh's appearances on 2014 and 2015 rewinds were alongside a fair few late-night hosts as well. This is in part because of YouTube's long-standing relationship with late-night TV. NBC partnered with YouTube in 2006, and some credit the virality of late-night clips as playing a role in Google's acquisition of YouTube. To this day, many major networks have contracts with the video sharing platform for monetization and AdSense, with network executives viewing YouTube as a distribution partner, and with some channels scoring up to 250 million views a month, it's hard to see it as anything else. As noted, late-night talk shows have always coasted off the individual personality more than a lot of other broadcasts. The anchors were able to build a rapport with the live audience and YouTube viewer alike, and although you'd be hard-pressed to say they had the sort of relationship with their subscribers that many content creators did, there were obvious parallels, and their presence on the YouTube platform was notably greater than other TV programs. However, in spite of its popularity on the video sharing platform, the genre was still mostly removed from YouTube in its presentation, still playing to what they knew best. For a lot of late-night talk shows, that sort of stability in a highly competitive industry was something that executives valued. But even after the ratings spike that the election of Donald Trump provided them, there were still signs that current popularity was waning a little. Late night needed a fresh face on the scene. YouTube was a good litmus test for what the market enjoyed without the boardrooms and arbitrations. It was like a mass focus group. If the right kind of figure on YouTube could hold down their entire channel, then who knows what else they could be capable of.
They don't know you, how giant you are on YouTube. 7.6 million subscribers, over 1 billion views. 1 billion. You were named in Forbes 30 under 30, and you just did a worldwide tour, 27 cities and 31 shows. Congratulations, pal.
Thank you so much. Thank
Well
you.
done. And
Lilly Singh seemed like the prime candidate for that sort of role. She had a proven record on YouTube and in Hollywood, not just as an entertainer and a comedian, but also as a person whose words held relative value in their circles, who could intertwine that social commentary with those amusing anecdotes. The increasing diversification of the market around her, yet the lack of representation on the late-night circuit left a comfortable niche for her to fill. However, that opening would need to present itself first. But that was just around the corner. The year is 2019, and NBC were just wrapping up the long-term talk show Last Call with Carson Daly. Daly wished to focus on his other TV projects more and felt that the talk show had run its course after 17 rather fruitful years. The NBC chairman sensed an opportunity, stating to interviewers that he saw the time slot's potential to become a creative playground, which would focus more on relevancy in the digital age. The alleged first choice for the studio was Chrissy Teigen, but she declined. And not too long after, the producer of Conan, John Irwin, proposed Singh as a possible replacement, citing her ability to balance comedy and serious commentary. Lilly had previously appeared with Conan, so Irwin seemed like a reasonable enough source. And with this in mind, NBC approached Singh, and together with her company Unicorn Island Productions, began to plan out what would become A Little Late with Lilly Singh. The MO was clear. The political commentary of many talk show hosts had taken up enough space, so Lilly would supposedly be replicating what had made her YouTube channel such a success: the comedic portrayal and narrative surrounding her experiences and unique background. On paper, this made a lot of sense. I said that earlier Ian and Anthony from Smosh couldn't speak about their experiences as a brown girl. Well, neither could Jimmy Fallon, Stephen Colbert, or James Corden. And the fact was that the format of late night shows allowed narratives to be based around the host, and Singh should have been able to bring some fresh perspectives to what was then a very tired genre. When news of this broke, it was met with hope, intrigue, and some skepticism. For many, Lilly represented a new generation of talk show hosts. She was the first ever late-night presenter to openly identify as bisexual. Hell, on announcement, she was going to be the only female heading up a major late-night program. And even though she wasn't the first, this news was met with praise by many who felt that the current register of TV hosts left a fair bit to be desired. For some, regardless of what she said, Lilly Singh was already going to be a breath of fresh air in an atmosphere that for some had grown very stale. However, although many welcomed this news, there was still an air of uncertainty as to whether her signature flair would translate into such a format. It was true that there were a lot of similarities between being the face of a YouTube channel and being the face of a talk show, but there was also one key difference. That being talk shows are just much higher production value. And although that can often be a positive facet, can sacrifice the homegrown charm and spontaneity of a YouTube channel. Lilly would have a full camera crew, script writers, producers, and she did obviously have her own studio involved as well, but there was the lingering question of how much she can make the talk show her own with so many other hands involved. Lilly showed that she could make it into Hollywood, but she never did it using the exact same skill set that had garnered her following on YouTube. The news that she would be utilizing that YouTube basis once more could be for better or for worse, but at this stage one could only speculate. In this case, the proof of the pudding was in the eating. But did people have the appetite for it? Well, there was only one way to find out. On the 12th of September, a channel by the name of A Little Late with Lilly Singh posted a YouTube video titled How Lilly Singh Really Built Her Show. It fabricates a rather far-fetched story about the origins of A Little Late, but drops the necessary details that would be required to understand the show. It also provides an impression of the sort of sketches that Lilly might be performing.
Choose desired network. Netflix. They have like 8 billion shows and 4 of them are good. No. HBO. Don't want to do nudity. MTV. I think I want my show to actually have music though. NBC. Sounds safe. When has anyone with a late night show on NBC ever been screwed over? Am I right?
It definitely integrates some of her commentary elements from her videos, but seems to do it more in a running narrative format, whereas in the past her commentary for content had felt more like a voiceover. This style seemed to aim to assimilate the two more, and overall viewers seemed to enjoy it, with many devotees commenting their appreciation. It was only a day later that NBC actually released a preview on their own network, showing that Lilly clearly still valued using YouTube as a platform, and it should have been a sign of good things to come. A Little Late with Lilly Singh made its debut on the 16th of September with an opening monologue that touched on her heritage, her background, and her status amongst many other late-night hosts who she was sharing the scene with.
Look, I get it, okay? I'm not your traditional talk show host. I mean, the media has mentioned I'm a bisexual woman of color so much that I feel like I should just change my name. A little long, but it has a nice ring to it. Come on, I'm more than just a bisexual woman of color, okay? It's a complete coincidence that I chose a network whose logo is also the pride flag.
The set seems almost designed to create the atmosphere of a late-night comedy club, one which places Lilly at the forefront of the stand-up scene as she delivers jokes that wouldn't seem out of place for that sort of environment. Alongside her gags, visual aids appeared on screen for viewers to provide some additional humor, though sometimes it felt a bit on the nose for what it was trying to explain.
I mean, real talk, if you put every network late-night host in one room together, and then add me and Hassan Minhaj, we look like the IT department at their law firm's Christmas party.
This format was accompanied by interviews, the first episodes being with writer and actor Mindy Kaling. The Office co-star Rainn Wilson makes a brief appearance too, alongside some sketches, most notably one baptized Lilly Singh Knocks Down the Door of Late Night, which featured Lilly performing one of her signature raps, explaining why she is not like other late-night talk show hosts, all while girl-bossing it to the top.
Hello, my name is Lilly, and I ain't a white man. My skin got some color, and it ain't a spray tan. I know you used to only Jimmy's in the spotlight, but I'ma throw some melanin up in your late night.
Alongside the release of this first episode was a flurry of promotional campaigns, including appearances on other late-night TV shows. She could do this as, unlike other late-night hosts, her shows weren't actually broadcast live, and had all been pre-recorded to fit in with her hectic schedule. Overall, the promotional campaign seemed to work, as the clips on her YouTube channel appeared to garner significant traction. But what would the reviews say? Well, many critics seem to laud her fresh perspective and approach on late-night television, some going as far to label it revolutionary. There were some critics who didn't enjoy a staccato interviewing style of Mindy, never really allowing the conversation to gather substantial flow, and some weren't a fan of certain YouTube-isms that she had brought over.
I start I'm being like, yeah, I was like that in high school too. You know, which is not true at all. And even the dorks in Euphoria would have been Miss America.
They're so hot.
They're so
no,
hot.
100%. When I watch the show, I'm like, you're all so hot.
They're
You
gorgeous.
have 2 eyebrows. What's that about?
Yeah.
I didn't have that in high school. I didn't have that at all.
Yeah.
How critics aren't exactly the sort of people Lilly was expecting to appease completely, and maybe some of these professional reviewers were just a bit too old to understand such aesthetic choices. The most important question pertained to what those on her native platform thought, the people who she was meant to appeal to. Well, it wasn't exactly unanimous positivity. Her opening monologue and sketch were the clips that attracted the most criticism, with many finding the humor too heavy-handed and repetitive.
Listen, I understand that for some people, white people, seeing someone like me host a show is terrifying.
As you probably noticed, there are a few references to her unique status as a bisexual minority on the telly, and although that was a breath of fresh air in the current environment, some felt that it had become the basis for too many jokes, some of which seemed to imply that people would be offended to see someone of her ethnicity on stage, which doesn't really make sense given other figures that came before her. With this in mind, commenters seemed to feel that she was giving herself a bit too much credit. Others just found the humor rather cringe, in particular rap, which despite being based on early YouTube content, didn't seem to land with the grace that those videos had done so before. It seems that those from mainstream media and those from YouTube both saw very different issues with Lilly Singh's show. Whereas some from the mainstream felt that certain technical choices didn't feel in keeping with late-night talk shows of the time, many viewers just felt that the humor fell flat as a whole. Now we know that critics and audiences often look for different elements in media. That's why the scores can sometimes be extremely different. However, I think although both sects of the internet had their own qualms with the show, most would agree that the general critical consensus was far more positive than the audience one. Now, many would argue that critical approach is much more important than the opinions of those on the internet, as critics do their job professionally, and many look towards critical reviews before making decisions on what shows to tune into. However, Lilly Singh's decision to make parts of her show immediately available to viewers online made much of the critical response redundant, as a YouTube clip could typically encompass an entire sketch, rather than a small segment from a film per se. A prospective audience member would be able to make a much more holistic judgment on whether this was something worth watching, and it was clear that for some that simply wasn't the case. Nonetheless, although YouTube comments and like-dislike ratings can reflect the response of a certain audience, they don't have too much individual bearing on the welfare of a TV show. If certain viewers don't like it, they don't have to watch it. Maybe this show simply wasn't for them. However, that was not enough for some.
I feel like a lot of people may be a little bit upset that the entire 4 minutes of this is just random jokes about race.
And maybe Lilly's background was coming back to bite her.
Better call Lieutenant Cobra.
By 2019, there was quite a significant space on YouTube for media criticism in general. It was particularly popular with the rise of reaction-infused content in this genre, mainly due to the increasing accessibility of source material as a whole. Most of this originated from YouTube or other platforms such as TikTok, and normally entailed a commentator explaining which teen idol couldn't actually sing. However, this had also extended into the realm of talk shows in the past, particularly with the popularity of shows like Dr. Phil, who also held a relatively strong YouTube presence. Nevertheless, in spite of their often considerable view count, late-night talk show hosts were never subject to too much commentary, mainly because of how inoffensive their core content was. Lilly Singh's content wasn't particularly offensive either, and in many ways the negative response experienced to the first episode of her show could have been ephemeral, and yet it wasn't. In fact, over the following weeks, the widespread lampooning of many of the clips from her opening show went viral across the platform, mainly because of how many topical debates it seemed to hit.
And it's crazy, like it's very groundbreaking because, you know, it's always just been pasty white dudes, you know, that's always been the trend, it's always been that, and now it's like, finally! And I don't think there would have been any buzz, I don't think anybody would have a problem with it, but her and her team made the big mistake of just making it all about that, making it all about her being a woman of color, like look at me, and move over white people, it's the brown woman's game now.
There were obviously those who had a political angle on it, particularly with much of the humor being identity-based. But videos on these subjects spanned across all genres. As noted, one of the major criticisms from online viewers was that Lilly's jokes were rather awkward or cringe, which I think is a detail worth noting down because, as I'm sure we all know, as excruciating as it can be to watch, cringe is a great source of views for a lot of creators, even in a format as basic as cringe compilations, which are accompanied by no commentary whatsoever.
The vaccine.
But let's be honest, a lot of late night shows have their unfunny moments, especially unfunny to a lot of netizens at least. Cringe comedy is often at the heart of a lot of these shows. What was so special about Lilly Singh? Well, there are a few reasons this became such a perfect storm of publicity. The first was simply because it was a new show on the block. Whenever something new happens, there is always a gap in the market for those who react to it. So almost immediately there are a fair few videos that provide their thoughts on Lilly's new venture, most of which, as we know now, were not the most praising. From there on, it's a domino effect of reaction videos. Secondly, Lilly's choice to use YouTube as a platform to prioritize distribution of her content cut out the risk of certain negative, critical, or word-of-mouth opinions restricting viewership. However, this backfired because then people's only interest in watching reviews or reactions to her content was for entertainment purposes, which bolstered content taking the piss out of her show. Most people don't read critical reviews for entertainment. They will watch a YouTube video though, and they were available in spades. It's pretty generally accepted that negative content will attract more views as a whole, and is often the basis for more effective YouTube comedy, so it's little surprise that many aspiring comedians saw it as just that. Then you have to consider her status as a large YouTube figure, one that magnifies such relevance only further. For some mysterious reason, possibly related to view count, though I couldn't possibly say why, many YouTubers enjoy talking about other YouTubers more than they do people of other mediums. And a YouTuber trying their hand at something else? Oh well, that was a goldmine waiting to happen. However, one cannot blame environmental factors alone for the scrutiny that the show found itself under. Although it's fair to say that certain missteps would have probably been overlooked if they occurred elsewhere, they weren't here.
So Lily, for your first episode, we're thinking you enter in a nice gray suit.
Gray? Well, I prefer something a little more colorful, obviously.
Yeah, so do I. I like a pink one. Oh, you mean... You don't mean it like that, do you?
Lilly Singh presents herself as a champion for those underrepresented in media. She obviously didn't explicitly say that, well, not too much.
Obviously.
But by highlighting that aspect of her identity and positioning herself as a figure on social commentary, she placed herself in a role that was often held to quite rigorous standards. At the same time, she had built a lot of her success on jokes about her own race. Watching her shows always felt like she was trying to balance calling out certain stereotypes while also using them as joke fuel in other contexts.
I am so happy to be here. And by the looks of it, a lot of you are happy to be here too. It's mostly the brown people because this was free to attend.
Probably the most notable incident in the first month of airing was when she made a passing comment about towels on some children's heads resembling turbans.
Dries their hair really quickly, so you know it's a very practical thing. I think they definitely had the turby twist on when they.
They look like my Punjabi friends. It's fine.
But they were like.
This sparked reasonable backlash at the time, and Singh quickly apologized for this. It's a sort of comment that probably would have flown under the radar on her YouTube channel, particularly given her Sikh background. But here, every joke that could be interpreted somewhat negatively was put under the magnifying glass, even jokes that weren't necessarily her own, which caused some controversy in itself.
Swiping and swiping and swiping, and I was like, oh, interesting. So you do know how to use your fingers.
They're just like scrolling, scrolling, scrolling. And I'm like, oh, your index finger does work.
This wasn't aided by the format of publication. With the traditional presentation of TV shows, reception would be quite linear. Talk shows are a hard craft to perfect, and it would be natural for someone's first episode to have a fair few hiccups. However, people's attention would quickly move on to the second episode when it's released. With YouTube, if a clip is notorious enough, it can provide discourse for months, and therefore YouTube will prioritize it in the algorithm. So even though there were many more clips uploaded to YouTube in the weeks after the first episode, people were still more likely to receive an impression from the content that had provoked the greatest reaction earlier. And although that may not have been representative of her show, shows that was what was happening. And by mid-October, discourse had manifested into this incessant dunking on a few select clips that were nearly a month old. It seemed to find new life every time a creator reacted to the more Lilly made a faux pas. Her content was essentially experiencing a negative virality of sorts, with figures from all over the content spectrum chiming in on the matter. YouTube, the platform that had not just launched Lilly's illustrious career, but had seemed central to the marketing of this new late-night venture, had seemingly reacted in the worst way possible. But Lilly herself, a YouTube megastar, would surely understand this scenario and know how to react accordingly, at least better than most Hollywood superstars, right? So, how would she respond?
And the reviews are from places like The Atlantic, Variety, CNN, Decider, Cosmopolitan, Deadline. Whereas before, there were negative reviews from like Angry Virgins.
Well, now as noted, Lilly's show was pre-recorded. Therefore, it would be fair to question if Lilly could even adjust the trajectory of her broadcast on the basis of this response. Well, you see, it was pre-recorded as Apple mentioned, but all in late 2019, so they were still recording after viewers watched and imparted their opinion of early episodes. And this did give Lilly a platform to respond to those who found her humor cringe or didn't approve of its messaging. So, how would she? Well,
Occasional mean comments, so let's hear one.
Absolute garbage. Where were the jokes? All I heard was racism towards white people and white men. Why is racism towards white people okay, but not for POC? Racism needs to end, and this nonsense is why it never will.
At first, she didn't appear to be too bothered, mostly ignoring any criticism, unless it was proper controversy such as the turban comment. However, over time, she did appear to be paying more attention to what people said, at first mocking the comments in the above clip. But barely a few days after that episode had aired, Lilly took to Twitter in a rather sour mood. Her tweet on October the 22nd read, "Imagine making a living by posting mean videos to YouTube. The downward spiral, the bad energy, the karma, the entitlement, the lack of creativity, the waste of potential. Young kids, don't follow this example. It's not good for the soul or the longevity of your career." In a way, this statement isn't entirely false. We've seen a lot of creators consumed by negativity because of the topics of their content. If you deal with the worst people, sometimes you begin to see the worst in people. However, I think the problem is that this seemed like a passive-aggressive response to the people criticizing or making fun of her show, which for a lot of people really was not that deep. Now, Lilly is entitled to say whatever she wishes to say, but she must have had some grasp on how this would provoke further response. And just like clockwork, it did, because if there's one type of person the internet loves to dunk on more than people trying to be funny but being cringe, it's people who can't take criticism. And Lilly seemed like one of those people right then, with many providing reasoned responses to distinguishing hate from legitimate criticism.
She goes on a big rant about why drama channels are bad, and she actually finishes the tweet with a message to the only people who can stand her content. Young kids, don't follow this example. It's not good for the soul or the longevity of your career. Don't make me do it, Lilly. You're really tempting me here. Don't make me shorten my own career span.
I think her replies annoyed people in the way that it almost demonstrated a lack of understanding in how YouTube operated and thrived, which, as a former YouTuber, you'd think she would have an abundance of. Sure, the website had evolved in the years since Lilly had pursued her Hollywood dreams, but it still operated on these same tenets that she had found success with. Most of the viewers who watched her content and supported her career didn't just disappear from the platform. They hadn't been consumed by the negativity, they just no longer followed her with the same enthusiasm they had in the past. Lilly's response may have been one that was rooted in frustration at public response to her content. She clearly didn't feel it was representative of the show as a whole, and she probably had a point, but rather than just suggesting that people watch more of the show, it was almost a tit for tat. She had to cherry-pick responses and strawman perspectives to get even with her haters.
Whoa, Lilly wants to kill all men? Okay, I did not say that! Okay, bro, you gotta calm down, okay? You gotta calm down. Lilly's straight up screaming at the audience. Also, she should smile more. I barely raised my voice. I'm Canadian. Okay, you're not even supposed to have your phone. Don't they take it when you walk in?
Yeah, but this is my backup phone.
But maybe she did know, maybe she did realize that this was the sort of response that such statements would provoke. Perhaps in a way she saw the online criticism as potential free promotion for future episodes. This theory would make sense in a way because every time the coverage on YouTube had the potential to die a death, Lilly would make some sort of public acknowledgement of it, and creators would feel inclined to issue further responses. Probably the most notable one of these coming from a creator by the name of Drew Gooden, whose video Leaving the YouTube Bubble has amassed over 15 million views and is the second most viewed video on his channel. That's a lot of people talking about Lilly Singh. I think you could easily look at many of the late night controversies and think that actually sometimes leaning into the controversial side of you can generate a lot of views. Hell, it had worked pretty successfully for some late night hosts whose views had stagnated at points.
Another. Do something about your dad's immigration practices, you feckless cunt. He listens to you.
Some would argue that this was just modern-day marketing, that as long as people were talking about her, she had done her job. And for a while, it obviously worked. However, I think the point of farming criticism is that it really depends who you're farming it from. With other late-night hosts, a lot of their content received negative attention from people who were never going to watch their show anyway, particularly given the fact that they often utilized political topics that were designed to be divisive. With Lilly, some of the criticism was coming from her own target audience, and much of it wasn't merely based on her political opinions. Now, a fair few criticisms towards Lilly were politically motivated, especially people who felt her humor was racist. But there were a lot of general criticisms as well relating to presentation and execution of the show. Criticisms that I don't think would have necessarily existed if they weren't issues to begin with. Additionally, even some politically motivated criticisms came from audiences who you'd think would appreciate her more progressive sense of humor, particularly those who felt she was appropriating certain cultures or that her self-deprecating humor perpetuated negative stereotypes. I think the problem was that many of those who were critical were viewers who could have been won over if the show was managed correctly. In that sense, Lee's response did not invite them to watch further. But what about those who were invited?
I've been an on-camera audience member a couple of times for this similar type of show, so that's why I felt I was qualified to review the show in this way. I feel I have a good understanding of what's a normal use of an applause sign, what's a normal use of a warm-up in the beginning, what's a normal amount of production, crew involvement in taping, etc. General things that most shows like this need. And I can honestly say that I was surprised by how overproduced A Little Late with Lilly Singh is.
A good video on this was published by the YouTuber Swell Entertainment, named I Was a Little Late with Lilly Singh audience member. Swell details the experience of being in the audience on multiple occasions, delivers some technical criticisms of the show, and imparts some anecdotes from her time at the studio.
Rico started talking to me before the taping of the second episode. He was not shy about the fact that he knew all the crew and that he was in fact working for the show. He said he had attended so many tapings that Lilly had taken notice and offered to try and find him a job for the show. He told me that his job varied, but for the most part it boiled down to him being in fact a paid audience member. Lilly doesn't seem to have a problem with people knowing that Rico works on the show as an audience member.
Audience is good. Just rather Rico out there. I feel like Rico's my comfort now. It's like when I see him in the audience, I'm like, okay, Rico's here, it's fine.
Aside from when the show is actually being taped.
Can we get a cheer? Okay, hold on. We got props here. Here you go, this is for you. What's your name? Rico.
However, the most interesting information comes towards the end of the video, when she mentions the presence of NBC executives and the tension it caused at the studio, particularly regarding Lilly Singh's monologue subjects.
Lilly's monologue became a Twitter moment because she did a whole monologue talking about being a bisexual woman and how she had come out about a year prior and how no one should get to dictate how much she talks about being a bi woman of color. And I'm conflicted on this. If this was an earlier episode, I would have applauded you for this statement because then I would have known that, okay, stand your ground, see how it goes over, and then if it doesn't work out, clearly me standing my ground is not keeping people watching and it's not helping reviews. People don't care that I'm standing my ground. They still don't think the jokes are funny. They don't like the games. They don't like the interviews. They don't want X, Y, and Z. They think the show should be canceled. I would have known that you would have had time to adjust and, grow as a show and grow as a late night host. However, I know that this was the fourth to last episode that was recorded, and I know that this was one of 4 episodes that I attended over the span of 3 months. And I'll tell you something, Lilly, I saw 0 growth in that time.
The impression was that Lilly wasn't really interested in adjusting her scope on the basis of the criticism, and on that basis, the show was staring down a rather imminent cancellation.
A Little Late with Lilly Singh is not your YouTube channel. You're the top of the food chain at your YouTube channel. For your channel, you have people that work for you. You are in charge of them. Over at Siren Studios, where A Little Late with Lilly Singh is filmed, sure, you are also in charge over there. The thing is, though, is that that's not your building. It's NBC's building. Your show is not on your YouTube channel. It's on NBC's network and their slot, and they get to decide whether or not they renew or cancel your show. The fact they placed you at Siren Studios away from NBC Studios alone should show you that you are erasable. If you're not making them stupid amounts of money, they will just get rid of your show. It doesn't matter what The Atlantic or CNN says about you, because the critics are not the people watching 90% of the time, and your viewership is dwindling, and I don't know what else to say.
But enough speculative talk. What actually happened?
Lilly Clearly, I hope NBC gives A Little Late with Lilly Singh a second chance. I don't think they will, but if they do, I think you need to look at the possibility of needing to do a rebrand. But it's also pointless for me to say that because you getting a second season will just reestablish in your mind that, oh, what I've been doing is fine, because clearly that's what got me a second season, so I just need to keep doing what I've been doing. Lilly, you're not the first person who has tried to do something outside of YouTube. And the reason a lot of them are able to start to try and do that is because they have what can get them in the door. They've got the well-known face, they've got the numbers, but they don't have what it takes to keep them in the room. Show me why you deserve to stay here.
As the first season progressed, the ratings were overall reported to be consistent with the final season of Carson Daly, which some may have cited as reason to consider the show an overall triumph. However, considering that this was touted as a show that was breaking down walls and tearing up the late night scene as we know it, considering how much publicity the debut season of this show received in comparison to the final one of Carson Daly, it would be hard not to find such data somewhat disappointing for what it was trying to do. This was a person who could command a channel that would regularly pull in millions of viewers a video, someone who was meant to be going toe-to-toe with the late night Jimmys, and yet in spite of all the controversy, the performance felt surprisingly tame. With all this in mind, it felt like Lilly's route in addressing all that transpired had brought attention to the show, but not necessarily the right kind. Although videos criticizing her had brought in plenty of views, much of the content didn't drive people towards this new network-backed venture, likely leaving some to wonder whether this risky project would be able to maintain such ratings when online coverage died down. Would it even be worth a second season, all things considered? Well, going off what I've said so far, I wouldn't blame you for being under the impression that this would have been the end of the late night circuit for Lilly Singh. If NBC were hoping that this would be the gambit that paid off, it hadn't really returned many dividends, and all things considered, in spite of the trailblazing narrative, everybody else seemed to think that this trail had been run. Given that episodes on main talk shows were temporarily placed on hold at the start of 2020, people thought it'd be a fitting time to put this experiment to bed.
A Little Late with Lilly Singh has indeed been cancelled temporarily. I don't think this will be temporarily for very long, mainly because it's not pulling in much views, and you know, it's getting quite a lot of negative attention. But who knows, maybe we will have to continue to deal with this thing.
On YouTube in particular, the narrative had mostly been established that this was likely the end of Lilly Singh as we know it. I think the idea that the show would be cancelled was good clickbait and played into the predominant outlook on the matter. Throughout the start of 2020, there didn't appear to be much news on the fate of Lilly Singh's late night show, and this led to more speculation, but there was probably one more piece of important information that led to hesitancy to decide on its fate. I know it's not the most fun topic to talk about, and I can't blame anyone for switching their ears off now, but it probably is one of the most relevant to today's video. As we know, in 2020, the world was deep in the clutches of the coronavirus. And amidst concern relating to the contagion of the disease, governments in many countries and American states urged people to socially distance and work from home where possible. This included the state of California and Los Angeles County, which enforced austere restrictions on social contact between parties who didn't share the same household. This was bad news for Hollywood, whose output typically required the input of a large workforce, and made filming anything safely practically impossible. This was particularly relevant for talk shows, which not just relied on a studio crew, but guest appearances and an audience to provide that necessary atmosphere. There were serious questions looming as to how they would be able to generate this environment without many of the seemingly essential elements that these shows demanded. However, with everyone at home and spending more time than ever in front of their screens, networks weren't ready to be caught slacking.
Hi guys, this is Jimmy Fallon, and this is the Tonight Show Home Edition, I guess you can call it. We really don't know what this is, but I wanted to put something out there for you guys so that we can just have some levity in these bizarre times.
It didn't take long for a new format to be launched, and for many talk show hosts, this encompassed the presenter hosting from their humble abode. They'd be accompanied by a couple crew members fully masked up, a guest on their television set, and an audience of people attending remotely. There were many people who definitely enjoyed this more laid-back ambience, but it's hard to say that some of these hosts felt completely at home, no pun intended, with the new setting. If only there was someone who could be.
COVID also means that we can't have an audience for your tapings. I mean, are you going to be able to handle working without the energy of a live audience?
Yeah, that sounds a lot like YouTube, and I don't know if I have enough experience.
Due to its recording schedule, the first season of A Little Late ran into the implementation of social distancing. However, when the time came around to consider renewal, much to some people's surprise, NBC decided to do just that. On May 13th, it was announced that A Little Late with Lilly Singh would be returning for a second season at the start of 2021. There were many reasons cited for this, although viewership wasn't quite as high as it prospectively could be. The show led all first-year shows in the number of social media engagements, with NBC lauding her as an incredible talent who brought an expanding global audience to the network. I think it's a valid point, although a cursory view may tell you that ratings weren't the best. If you're bringing 700,000 new viewers to a network, then you're likely doing more than a person who may pull 1 million already existing viewers. In this scenario, the social media response aided the show. Even if most potential viewers thought it was bad, the debate that it created online reeled in many individuals who hadn't ever engaged in late-night TV as a genre, at least not to the degree that this discourse did. However, the evolving dominion that talk shows could exist in was also probably the main cause for consideration. Household names were being forced to downscale production to maintain it, and whereas some may not have been accustomed to that style, especially those who are used to a lot of support, it was that style that established the careers of many online creators on a certain video sharing platform.
You got your own NBC show? Oh my god, this is such a big deal.
No, humble dude, it's season 2.
Season 2? What?
You're frozen.
This was Lilly Singh's moment, and she enthusiastically announced the second season of her show on its official YouTube channel, inspiring excited responses from many of her fans. Would she be up to the challenge? And would any criticism directed towards her previously be heeded? This would all mean very little unless she gave people reason to watch her. She may finally have a home advantage, but she still had many other contemporaries to compete with and wrestle viewership from.
Oh, this is amazing. I love this. And there were other episodes where I was like, this ain't it. I am well aware. The schedule didn't always allow me to have a monologue that I was 100% about. Sometimes I would feel a little about it, but the show had to go on. And yeah, I'm well aware that in some episodes I look hella uncomfortable, and you know what? That's probably because I am.
Well, in a video posted on her personal vlog channel the same day that season 2 was announced, she promised to do just that, stating that although she was pleased with her work in season 1, she knew there was still a lot to be done.
The truth is, it was my season 1 of doing something brand new, and season 1 Lilly reminded me a lot like first YouTube video Lilly. You know, everything takes time and takes practice, and the reason I communicate this is really just to say I'm proud of season 1, but I know there's a lot to improve on. And so when you give me feedback, like why doesn't she have this guest on her show? Why isn't she doing this? It's not for lack of trying, it's just I'm trying to figure it out.
But words can only say so much. Would it be done?
I have learned, and I feel like going into season 2, what I'm really excited about is taking all that knowledge, all the times I've made mistakes and stumbled and was confused. Now I know all that stuff. I still have a lot to learn, but I know some stuff now, and I can step into season 2 just that much better.
Much of 2020 was pretty quiet on the announcements front of the TV show at the heart of this humble video. But in December, it was reported that the writing crew behind A Little Late had been completely overhauled, with Lilly revealing in a statement that she intended to bring more creativity to the table. It seemed that she would have a bit more freedom to pursue her own visions. And on January the 11th, 2021, the second season of A Little Late with Lilly Singh made its debut. And we would finally answer the question, what has changed?
Punjabi words for raise the roof, and that is exactly what we will do.
Well, to be honest, a lot.
Why aren't you playing this game on your show? Because legally we can't do that. Why aren't you doing more sketches? Because when I shoot one for my YouTube channel, it's this much money. When you shoot it for the show, it's this much money.
In her video reflecting on season 1, Lilly had acknowledged people's desire for more sketch sequences, and the first upload from the new season onto the program's YouTube channel was just that. A sketch in which Lilly plays a variety of characters, including the classic YouTube caricatures of her family and Kamala Harris, whose similarities with Lilly are used as a foundation of a joke that they are actually related. She also uploaded a version of this onto her personal YouTube channel, with it amassing 1.7 million views as of today. This is the sort of sketch where Lilly's nature to play multiple characters worked very effectively in a COVID world that aimed to minimize social contact. Although in the first series Lilly had committed to mostly refraining from overtly political topics, the second season brought Lilly her rant room, which would allow her to speak more candidly on subjects that mattered to her. These did include some political subjects, which isn't surprising given that this was around the time of the inauguration of then-President-elect Joe Biden and the resistance that such circumstances precipitated, this being one of the first topics that Lilly addresses in her rant room.
If I can be real, right now we need all
all the positivity we can get, especially with the recent news of everything that has gone down at the Capitol. And I'm gonna be honest, I have lost all patience for anyone that is still questioning privilege.
Additionally, interviews seem far more free-flowing. One of the most common criticisms, even from established media critics, was that Lilly's nature to try and interject her own jokes and punchlines seems to detract from the presence of the guest. In the second season, Lilly still manages to interweave herself into certain questions, but at the same time so that it doesn't take away from her company. It'd also be fair to say that Lilly's second season probably did more work in altering the landscape of talk shows than her first one. Over 20% of her guests on season 2 were making their late night debut, a very significant percentage considering how many shows often tend to stick with certain safe choices for those spots. Lilly Singh often went with guests that she felt she'd be comfortable around, and it seemed to work rather well for her.
You have such a level of confidence that I really love, also low-key want. And I feel like for season 2, I'm trying to be the iciest version of myself. How can I be my iciest self for season 2? Like, give me some pro tips.
So like icy is like a mentality, it's your hustle. So, you know, maybe setting some financial goals. I mean, I already know you a boss. You have your own show, so I could tell you no, like you already got your life figured out.
In an interview shortly after the first episode of the new season aired, Lee stated that she wanted to bring a degree of imperfection to the show, and this is also pretty evident. A lot of content that would be typically cut out of a larger scale production was left in. Shots of the crew fully masked up, and the backstage equipment may seem unprofessional in certain environments, but here it seemed to fit the casual mise-en-scène rather effectively. Funnily enough, in spite of being restricted to a single residence, Lee seemed to find much more use for the set than she had in the first season, utilizing it for a variety of purposes and skits.
I just want you to confirm that there is good spirits in here, and if there's bad spirits...
Well, let's go throughout the whole house.
I mostly just don't want them in hair and makeup. It's fine if they're in like the edit bay and stuff like that. I just not trying to have them in
all right.
Now, just because something is different doesn't mean that it's necessarily better, and for some online it certainly wasn't. Many people who had criticized Lilly's first season continued into the second, pointing out what they felt were shortcomings in this sort of content.
Yes, this is the way we're used to seeing Lilly Singh and other YouTubers portrayed, talking directly in front of a camera, or sketches where they play more than one person in the same scene. But it very much feels like an industry plant Lilly Singh instead of actual Lilly Singh. Simply because, like any other TV show, there are many people working on it. And the more of Lilly's late show I watch, the less control I feel like she actually has over it.
And it's not like this criticism was without merit. Certain aspects of Lilly's show probably could be perceived as unnecessarily convoluted and lacking focus. The jokes were hit and miss, and there were some pretty bad misses. However, the best metric to tell if this sort of content was effective with its target audience was just to read the comments as always. And in this season's case, the response was much more positive, and it's clear that these weren't just fans who would say that regardless. There were many viewers who noted its improvement on the previous season. Now, this doesn't mean that negative comments didn't exist elsewhere or anywhere, but for the most part they provide the impression that these people would never really enjoy Lilly Singh anyway, or late night TV as a whole. It's important to remember that late night shows can be a bit preachy and heavy-handed with their humor and messaging. Trying to keep an audience entertained and pushing the envelope while not being crass is a somewhat delicate art, and you will fall short at points. Lilly Singh having some of that wasn't a deal breaker for most people, and let's face it, she didn't necessarily build her career on subtlety. As a TV show working within the perimeter of a long-established industry, there would always be some contrivances, but I think this was as close as many were going to get to Lilly Singh actually being herself in the late night format. And for regular viewers of her, that was a resounding victory. This appeared to be a resounding victory for Lilly as well, who spoke about how she felt so much more comfortable in season 2, stating that she had become tired of monitoring herself and her thoughts and just chose to speak about whatever was on her mind, prioritizing that authenticity.
Like, admittedly, in season 1, I thought there was moments where I wasn't completely being myself. Maybe I was nervous or I felt a lot of pressure. And so with season 2, I'm really prioritizing throwing all facades out the window. I want to be completely authentic. You know, me and my producers always have like little mini headbutt sessions because I'll be interviewing a guest and they'll script something that's like, you know, I loved you in this movie. And I'll be like, I've never seen that movie. And I insist on being authentic about it because I don't want to lie. I'd rather make the time to watch all of the things before I interview someone. And if I don't have the time, I'd rather be honest and say like, listen, people online are going crazy about you, as opposed to like, I loved you in this movie and I'm such a big fan, because I just feel like it doesn't real.
It seems like the shackles that COVID had placed on society in general had actually unshackled Lilly from a lot of the customs that late night TV was expected to conform to. And for the first time, Lilly Singh had room to embrace the environment that had brought her so much prosperity on YouTube. Could this be the future of television talk shows? Could Lilly Singh be the future of late night TV? sometimes there's very little you can do.
Next time I hear anyone hating on Gen Z, I'm just gonna tell them bye, bye, bye. What?
Throughout the start of 2021, Lilly Singh's show appeared to be performing well with those who engaged with it. However, unfortunately, it's also about the number of people who engaged with the content in the first place. And in a time when numbers should have been boosted from people staying at home and watching TV, Lilly Singh's ratings left a lot to be desired. In the extent of her time on air, her viewership decreased approximately a quarter from her predecessor Carson Daly, with this continuing to trend downwards in the second season. This was also the case with YouTube, where views on videos would regularly fall below 100,000. Additionally, as much as the home setting was pretty unique and well suited to Lilly's style, many shows were beginning to venture back into the studio. And although it wouldn't have been impossible to continue the home setting, which appeared to be popular with some viewers, it would have been a gamble as they didn't exactly embody the late night aesthetic that many had become used to. Although it was true that Lilly brought a fair few new viewers to the network, there was still a lot of financial factors that NBC needed to consider. And in lieu of this, just under a month before the second season even concluded, it was announced that A Little Late with Lilly Singh would not be returning for a third season, to the disappointment of fans and the joy of detractors. With that said, it was also announced that this was not the end of Lilly Singh's career at NBC, and that she would be signing a first-look contract with Universal for future unscripted projects, which shows the network definitely saw the potential in much of her second season. It was also announced that she would be involved in the development of a comedy series with Blackish creator Kenya Barris. Not a bad result. Overall, this news was framed by many outlets as a recalibration rather than a cancellation. Lilly herself released a statement to social media on the day of the announcement, stating that although they would be saying goodbye to A Little Late with Lilly Singh, this would allow her to focus more on her production company and her own projects. Additionally, she was very excited to share the aforementioned upcoming enterprises that she would be working on. And to be honest, Lilly has every reason to feel optimistic moving forward. As she had mentioned in an earlier video of hers, regardless of the reception to her show, it had raised her profile notably, and even during its airing, the number of roles she secured increased significantly. This included acquiring further voice acting parts for 2 animated feature films and an array of TV positions that would eventually lead to her being offered a spot on the judging panel for Canada's Got Talent, and a host role for this year's Academy Awards pre-show.
Right now, I'm joined by Lilly Singh. I just hijacked that interview.
Yeah,
I did. I turned that into for a friendly hug.
Willingly.
Okay. I noticed. Are those products on your feet?
Oh, these right here?
Oh, them right there?
They are. Those right there? Yes.
Fire. Well, we have similar gigs today. You've got the ABC pre-show.
Yep.
I've got, the pre-show and the live show for eTalk, representing for Canada.
Yes.
And I'm here with one of Canada's favorites.
By all intents and purposes, endless doors have been opened due to her position in hosting a late-night talk show, regardless of whether it was good or bad, and the future was looking quite exciting for her. Lilly expressed optimism in moving forward with these undertakings and bringing diversity to the screen in an even bigger way. And she's certainly not wrong. There was little doubt that this was a great leap forward in her career and work that would be turned down by very few people. As much fun as she probably had with the second season of her show, it was also a very demanding and time-consuming schedule, and this change in pace would probably give her a bit more breathing room to do what she wanted to, and on her own terms as well. With this in mind, on the 23rd of July, Lilly returned to her YouTube channel.
But real talk, I've missed this so much. I've missed connecting with you, chatting with you, inviting you into my life, which is why I'm making this video to give you a little bit of an update and also make some little announcements.
Here she spoke about a variety of projects, but also stated that she was excited to be back on YouTube and making content that she had control over, promising to be more untamed than ever.
I'm excited to announce that every Thursday from now until Christmas, you will get a new video on this channel. Get ready for a whole new series of sketches that are bigger, flawless, edgier. The hunter just killed Bambi's mom with a gun, just like the one your daddy has. Weirder.
It is so weird that you do this.
Oh, and a little more ratchet.
It seems that her enjoyment of sketches had been reignited once more, and over the coming weeks and months she posted many of these sketches onto her channel. These videos typically involved a larger cast and higher production values than her older content, but still attempted to convey that same relatable sketch humor that propelled her to stardom.
How can it be biryani without lemon juice?
I promise it's very popular.
Let me speak to the chef.
Excuse me?
You should know he's doing it wrong.
Ma'am, hello, ma'am, please, ma'am, please, hello. But you're exaggerating, right? Like no one actually comes into the kitchen.
You call this samosa? More like grosa.
A couple of these videos picked up on the algorithm, but most performed pretty modestly for a channel of Lilly's size, scoring a similar count to her network ratings. The truth was that comedy on YouTube had headed in a different direction in the last few years, either towards more commentary-driven content or even shorter, more absurdist sketches like the ones you see on TikTok. The audience was evolving and many of Lilly's prospective viewers did lie in places other than YouTube. If one thing was clear, it was that NBC quite liked Lilly Singh. And although they weren't willing to continue the talk show, they wanted to retain her abilities for future content, and both parties seemed happy with that outcome. It's not hard to see why many thought a late-night show catered towards a more millennial audience should have legs. Unfortunately, it just didn't. And although there'll always be a recurring audience, the numbers have been dwindling for the past few years, and Lilly's slot was already not considered prime time. Since Lilly's departure, other hosts who had broadcast at similar time slots had also left their programs, including Trevor Noah and James Corden. NBC themselves had stated they would not be replenishing the time slot and subsequently handed it back to affiliates in the following month, making Lilly the last host of a talk show in that time slot held since 1988. From NBC's perspective, it was clear that it wasn't just a Lilly problem, but a systemic one that wouldn't be so easy to resolve. Some presented the cancellation of Lilly Singh's talk show as a mercy killing, and although a network is seldom going to admit when something isn't working, the decision to discontinue programs at that specific time slot after discontinuing Lilly's show probably implies they were struggling with that period as it was. And Lilly Singh's show was much more a Hail Mary to save a struggling medium, which less and less people were tuning into, rather than the destroyer of NBC bank balances. It seems evident that really NBC were trying to ask a greater question. Lilly Singh was a creator with 15 million subscribers on YouTube. Could you translate that sort of digital success into a media-based viewership for a network TV show? The short answer in that case was no.
It's been an honor to be on your screens for 2 seasons. Thank you so much for all of your love and support and for betting on this crazy girl. I can't wait to see what we do together next. Until then, it's been fun.
What's the long answer though? I think it's very easy to write off A Little Late with Lilly Singh as something that was doomed to fail from the start. And in a way, I think there are a lot of valid arguments that could be made to support that. We've already heard some of them. However, is there an alternative reality where A Little Late with Lilly Singh was actually an undisputed commercial and critical triumph? I'd say it was more possible than many might assume. First, we need to talk about the circumstances that surrounded the creation of A Little Late with Lilly Singh. Sure, it wasn't a great time for talk shows. Many believe this was in part due to the rise of streaming, and they may have had a point, but many clips from talk shows still performed well on YouTube, and even if they were losing their share of the market in one place, they still held down a reasonable audience in another. Lilly Singh's career was from YouTube, born and raised, and this should have been a stomping ground. Although times were changing, they hadn't changed that quickly. When reading comments about her late night show being launched, I noticed a trend of a lot of people saying they were happy for her even though they didn't really watch her content anymore. I think that should have been considered when creating the show. Lilly was someone who didn't quite have the draw she once had on YouTube, and late night talk shows face the same problem on TV, but in a way that's why it should have worked. But sure, people thought they had outgrown Lilly. And they definitely had on YouTube, but a more mature spin on her content is exactly what the late night world should have brought her. It should have been an open goal for that much at least. There are obviously a wide spectrum of opinions on Lilly's technique, and I have to say it's not really my cup of tea personally. But when you've seen enough late night clips, you tend to gather a mental image for what is generally considered acceptable content for the genre. And Lilly's content wasn't exactly outside of that realm. If the second season showed us anything, it's that although there may be some who would never really enjoy Lilly's style, there definitely was a way to make her YouTube sketch content compatible with some of the usual traffics of mainstream television. But, I hear you say, season 2 was completely different to the first season, and late night television as a whole. Lilly was in an environment much closer to her original YouTube content. And you, my friend, are not wrong, I'll grant you that much. But season 2 didn't just work the way it did because it was in a house. It may have lifted some pressure off Lilly's shoulders, but she still had to carry the show in a way that she hadn't done before. And for many people, she did just that. But how would it have translated into a studio environment?
You might think it sounds corny, but the last generation wasn't taught about self-love, and they decided to reboot Nazis, so I'm just saying. Just saying. Yeah, I went there. That's right, sir.
Well, I think she should have just taken more of a homegrown vibe to make it work. Lilly stated that she often felt confined in her sets and suits. And although they're often foundations of many late-night talk shows, I don't think a lot of people would have cared if she didn't care for them. It was the same reason a lot of people found the monologue somewhat laboured. It wasn't what was comfortable for her. And although sometimes it's good to learn new skills and abilities, trying to cram it in multiple recordings in the space of a few months wasn't going to aid her development on that front. And many people noted how she did genuinely seem to struggle with those aspects of the show. Drop the suits, drop the monologues, Lilly worked best when she was surrounded by people who she could bounce her energy off. In promoting her show, Lilly made a fair few appearances on other people's shows, and in many comment sections you'd see audience members surprised that actually she could have a pretty natural and free-flowing conversation.
That's so cute that you spend your money on others.
Oh,
I do the
absolutely.
same, totally.
I feel like I have my priorities in check.
Me too.
I do.
Mine are different though. I was like, happy birthday, Henry. Snuggle.
Lilly was a talented speaker in many regards. She often seemed at her most comfortable when she was being impromptu. And if that talent was harbored correctly, there was no reason for it not to work in a talk show environment. It really should have been a slam dunk as well. But talk shows are still more than that. And as many observed, this was a stale genre that Lilly should have kicked the door in. But a lot of people felt she ultimately didn't manage to. What could she have done differently to ensure that change? Lilly had made the bold decision to not necessarily make current affairs the focal point of her content and to completely avoid politics as a topic. This was framed as an active production choice, but also would have been imperative due to the recording schedule, as there was no way to predict what subject would be trending months after recording. It's a challenging objective to set oneself, and many would argue that it was simply impossible to do because current affairs is how talk shows make themselves relevant to their audience. Nevertheless, the movement towards YouTube for a lot of these programs did provide the potential for more timeless discourse, as content could be accessed in the months, years, and decades after they aired. With that acknowledged, Lilly still needed to ensure that the subject she lined up could sufficiently propel an episode of her show.
Since I started the show, I've had a lot of people online say things like, why does she talk so much about being a bisexual woman of color? First of all, I talk about my dog and The Rock way more, so get your facts straight, okay? Facts. And second, no one else on late night can talk about it. So why wouldn't I use this opportunity to start a discussion?
The topics she chose often related to her identity and experiences, and on the surface they weren't bad subjects to discuss or to channel into one's content. But the traditional monologue style of late-night TV often made the delivery of these subjects somewhat forced and stiff. I think the show not tell aspect would have aided her here. People felt most empowered when she was able to express her identity without explicitly stating it, and it clearly held meaning to a lot of people that shouldn't have been overlooked. There was real potential here to change late-night TV for the better. So yes, for what it's worth, I do think as a cozy late night show that perhaps didn't ask too much of the viewer and just featured Lilly shooting the shit with a variety of celebrities and channeling her energy and background in a unique way could have worked pretty effectively. Even in a studio environment, and it still could have become that in time if a third season had been greenlighted. The first season was quite the deep end to be thrown into, even as an established figure amongst Hollywood society. Lilly had never anchored a major talk show, let alone held a prominent role in one. She'd done a few interviews and proven herself as a decent conversationalist, but when you introduce so many different features and a crew to a person who is often coasting off their own spontaneous nature, you're seriously complicating the formula. But it's not that I don't think it couldn't have worked in the right environment, it's just that in an attempt to provide Lilly Singh with proverbial stabilizers, the network overlooked what made her such an effective talker and host in the first place. Those are the teething issues of the first season that could have been alleviated over time, and in a way they were. Yet, it wasn't enough. Why? Well, first impressions are everything. I'm going to say something fairly uncontroversial right now. The first episode of A Little Late with Lilly Singh was not very good.
Thank you so much for being here, and welcome to the first episode of A Little Late with Lilly Singh.
I appreciate that the critics saw something that a lot of audiences didn't, but for an episode that was meant to take late night into a new era, it fundamentally fell short of what it was trying to do. It's funny because the whole episode is about the fact that she's breaking new ground, and yet bar a couple moments, it all feels surprisingly interchangeable with the majority of her peers and competitors. Sometimes it's not just about saying, it's about being. And there is little debate that Lilly Singh is a person of Indian Punjabi descent raised in Canada, but if someone put a gun to your head and told you to prove it, you wouldn't just say you are or perform a rap about it, you'd show your culture and background. For the number of jokes directed at white people's expense, it still almost felt catered to white people who were comfortable laughing at their failure to understand other cultures, but not comfortable in trying to actually understand them. For a show that should have been directed towards a slightly younger audience who are far more engaged in that sort of discourse, particularly with the multicultural aspect of online spaces, it felt like they didn't have a fundamental comprehension or respect for a fair few of their target viewers.
Listen, I understand that for some people, white people, seeing someone like me host a show is terrifying.
And yet, whereas the first episode could have flown under the radar and never been spoken about again, many descended on the show to critique, criticize, and deride Lilly Singh for said failings. And as noted, the YouTube algorithm then favored these clips as they received the most attention, regardless of whether it was positive or negative. Modern YouTube comedians and commentators similarly chimed into the matter that was one of their own trying to fly the coop, yet struggling to spread their wings. But then the second episode aired, and the third, and the fourth, and the fifth, and the rest, yet in the next couple months, people still almost seem to solely focus on the first few episodes, or just the first episode exclusively. Now, Lilly didn't exactly help by making indirect responses to these videos, which showed that she hadn't really watched any of them, which then provoked more responses to people annoyed at her response. But what if I was to sit here and tell you that it wasn't just the second season that was fine, but a large majority of the remainder of the first season was fine as well? Maybe not. There are still a fair few issues which we've already spoken about, and I think they were difficult to fully address in the space of a season that was recorded with the intensity of a little late. To be frank, it still gets pretty dire at points. Nonetheless, a large majority of the season wasn't video response worthy, and that's why, simply put, there were very few videos covering those episodes. And it is a fair bit of a shame that this was the case, and that many had passed judgment before October had even come around. It was episode 1 of season 1. You go back and watch early episodes of some of the most prestigious talk shows, and they aren't the best. Hell, some of the greatest TV shows of all time needed a couple seasons to fully find their feet. It's easy for people to give books, films, and the rest a negative review because you can experience it all at once. The episodic nature of a TV series, though, made that first episode even more important. A Little Late with Lilly Singh will be remembered by many for as little as a line. Hell, some people were still reacting to those first season monologues over half a year after these episodes were published onto YouTube.
And y'all, I can't make this up. She really decided to respond to the hate by doing this.
This is literally the worst thing I have ever seen. Who gave her this show?
Yeah, girl. I don't know about that one.
Let me make it clear, Lilly stoked the fire by responding the way she did, because it kept all the focus on these questionable writing decisions. Dismissing what was otherwise legitimate criticism, she probably felt like she was being unfairly scrutinized for cherry-picked segments of a show that had already aired hours of content at that point. It's natural to feel defensive, particularly given the amount of effort she felt she had invested into the show. But the best response would have just been to speak to audiences and ask them to give it another chance if she really thought it was worth it. As noted, she alienated her own viewers through her style, and they weren't audiences that could never be won over. It just felt like she didn't care enough to try and do so, or she thought it was an effective marketing tool to win new people over. And to an extent it was, I guess, but only as a temporary measure, and not the healthiest measure, all things considered. As we know, at the end of the first season, NBC bragged about how A Little Late with Lilly Singh received the most social engagements of any debut TV show. And that was a feat of some sorts, but that was only due to the discourse surrounding her qualities as a late-night host in the program itself. Problem was, as season 2 improved on season 1, there was less desire for that debate. Lilly probably could have accrued more short-term views by inviting all her internet critics round and debating them at her house. But instead, she actually clearly took some of the feedback on board and transformed her set and style. And yet, because the show was now actually good, or passable at least, she couldn't rely on that debate to spur short-term ratings anymore. The other issue was there was approximately 8 months between the end of season 1 and the start of season 2, of which the show was barely mentioned to the press. This interval meant that by the time the start of the second season came around, many who had previously been engaged in the debate now were investing their attention elsewhere. When I was speaking to a few friends about this video, I mentioned that A Little Late with Lilly Singh was actually renewed for a second season, which provoked surprise from many who assumed it had ended with season 1. Humans are interesting creatures. For a lot of online trends and subjects, we're only really interested in providing it with attention to a certain threshold. And then unless there is some revelation relating to the topic, we are unlikely to revisit the matter. Lilly Singh's show could have very easily had a rocky start, but built up its credo over time. And by the time that it caught the attention of those who may not be within her core fanbase, had a pretty solid reputation. Unfortunately, content spreads quickly online, and it was first impressions that defined the future of the show. You can make the argument that Lilly's show would never have improved if she hadn't received as much criticism, which is a fair point and possibly true, but the criticism became bigger than the show itself. People reached their limit for discourse regarding Lilly Singh's late show on the basis of the first few episodes and the subsequent reactions to them, but weren't ready to give it another try by the time the second season came around. First impressions really were everything. The first episode of A Little Late with Lilly Singh was not very good, but I don't think it was a complete representation of what became of the show. Unfortunately, the nature of the internet allowed judgment to be passed before she even had the chance to improve, and probably doomed the show before season 2 had even been conceptualized. And for that, it was a shame. Let's wrap this up now. There's an episode of SpongeBob SquarePants in season 4 called Mrs. Puff, You're Fired, in which Mrs. Puff is dismissed due to SpongeBob's continuous failure of driving tests. Mrs. Puff is replaced by a drill sergeant who surprisingly manages to teach SpongeBob how to drive, but with one small caveat, that our square-panted friend has learned to do it blindfolded. When the test comes around once more, our special little sponge is told that it's illegal to drive while blindfolded, and thus the test deteriorates very quickly, causing destruction throughout the entirety of Bikini Bottom until he's blinded once more by Patrick's slacks and suddenly becomes a competent driver again, completing the test. Unfortunately, due to the destruction that has been wrought, he is given a fail again, and Mrs. Puff returns, much to her dismay. It's a fun little anecdote, but there is a lot of truth to it. Sometimes you become so accustomed to doing something a particular way that a change designed to help you may have the opposite effect.
And you see, this is where the party starts.
Lilly Singh procured acclaim on YouTube, a platform designed to allow people to create content without the large budget and production value. In many ways, Lilly proved her talent as a creator that could use her experience to attract millions of recurring viewers. On the flip side, late night TV, in spite of their extravagant ambience, had also garnered a strong online following, with many hosts and networks collaborating directly with YouTube to make sure their reach was optimized on a website that attracted a significantly different audience. Lilly and late night originated from very different parts of the creative world, but they ran parallel to each other, and bridging that gap seemed like the natural progression for both parties and both platforms. Yet it really was the epitome of a misfire by all accounts that will probably cause a network to think twice before working with the creator again. It prompts the question we asked at the start again: are YouTubers really suited to a world outside YouTube? Well, if the 2 seasons of A Little Late demonstrate anything, it's that I don't think the potential wasn't there, it's just Hollywood is struggling to understand YouTubers. NBC had said they intended to turn the time slot into more of a creative playground primed for the digital era, but I don't think anyone was committed enough to question what that really meant. From their perspective, it seemed to imply an integration of sly winks to YouTube, but without the proper understanding of why they worked on the platform in the first place. Lilly Singh's late night show often tried to foster direct fan support rather than necessarily marketing it as a separate entity from the mind of Lilly Singh. It's a strange decision because, as noted, by that point she partly left YouTube behind. This is a problem with a lot of YouTuber-based media outside of YouTube. It alienates viewers who have very little familiarity with your content as a whole, yet often doesn't reach as much of your fan base who are primarily based on YouTube. Lilly Singh's YouTube content reached all 4 corners of the globe, something that very few late-night shows can successfully do. Whenever YouTubers do this, it feels like studios are more interested in cashing in off their already established social media presence rather than actually considering what made them popular in the first place. Comedy on YouTube had largely moved on from Lilly's style, and although the show had potential, it had to mature with the viewers. There was definitely an attempt to do so, but it moreover consisted of putting Lilly in a colourful suit and making her do stand-up in front of a live TV audience instead of actually playing into her well-documented strengths. She was not a stand-up comedian, nor did she wear suits really. She thrived on the spontaneous, the mess, the chaos, and watching her try to perform within the confines of that first season of Late Night sometimes felt like watching a person trying to break out of a straitjacket. Lilly had all these resources at her feet, and many probably thought it should have bolstered her comedy, but it's not how she learned nor what she was accustomed to. Just because something should make it easier doesn't mean it will make it easier. Sometimes people are used to the lack of direction because they feel they know themselves best. Combine that with an absolutely brutal recording schedule and some ill-timed responses from Lilly herself, and for many the first season was dead on arrival and not worth resuscitating. But then season 2 happened.
Sometimes you gotta do things to fulfill your vision and just like make it happen. That's what today is. Today is just living our dream. Chris, we're just living our dream today. Not if you're with me. No, not the camera.
And even if not everyone enjoyed it, it gave Lilly the breathing room to prove her ability in a space where many had already written her off. What would have made recording far more challenging for a variety of established talk show hosts took Lilly back to where she was most comfortable, and her second season seemed to operate far more smoothly than the first, with guests, viewers, and Lilly herself all appearing to have much more fun than the season that had come before. Alas, it had come a little too late for Lilly Singh. The damage had already been done when the first season hit the screens and many prospective viewers had switched over the channel, with others receiving their impression from content creators which directed online opinion. Nonetheless, if the result of the second season is just a piece of media that she and her audience can watch back and enjoy, then maybe it's done the trick. I don't think Lilly laments it too much, and overall it has brought her far more opportunities than it has cost her. And if that's the result of any piece of media, then you can consider it a victory. With that said, it's obviously a shame that the show couldn't be something more, couldn't be the trailblazing shot in the arm that late night TV desperately needed. Ratings are still struggling, and it's not like there isn't a reality where I don't see shows that could resemble Lilly's accruing a large viewership. I do think YouTube and late night could have a close relationship. I think there's more opportunity in using a creator's personality and appeal in these spaces than there are in film and TV. But you have to understand that a lot of people don't just tune in for a name. You need to work with that personality and identity as well. Perhaps a little late with Lilly Singh's second season, even if it didn't return the numbers to maintain its own survival, could provide a few ideas for agonizing TV executives all over Hollywood.
So I'm a big believer that if you have blessings, you don't build a higher fence, you build a longer table.
I quite like Lilly Singh, not in the haha I think she's hilarious way, or even the yas queen slay way. I don't think she always knew how to respond to people discussing her show, and I think she interpreted a lot of the criticism as bad faith, when really they probably had a point. I think she was part of the why can't everyone just get along generation. A lot of newer creators on YouTube just didn't subscribe to that, which is why I think they clashed heads. I don't find her particularly funny, but then again, I never really watched her content. And to be honest, neither did a lot of the people that roasted her. However, I don't think it's hard to see why people like her around and enjoy her presence. She always seems to convey herself as someone who knows how to communicate with the world and develop a strong, unique chemistry with those that were subject of her attention. Unlike other certain hosts, you didn't need to manufacture a warm aesthetic because Lilly was a naturally warm person. And you sometimes wonder if the studios had actually ever dealt with someone like that, who didn't need the prompts to have conversations. She didn't need to be told what to be interested about because she was legitimately interested in things other than herself. She didn't need to be put inside the late night mold, she was there to break it.
You're absolutely right that it was definitely an adjustment and a huge, huge learning curve, and I'd be lying if I said I didn't go onto set and try to break all the rules every single day. But having said that, I do feel like it's kind of a natural progression of what I want to do in my life, and I believe that different stories live on different platforms, you know, so I still do my YouTube stuff, I still do stuff on socials, but I really am enjoying season 2 of Late Night.
Alas, maybe a little late with Lilly Singh wasn't meant to be, and it was cursed from the start. Maybe there was a right way to do it, but it just didn't happen, with networks and Lilly failing to promote its longevity. It's hard for anyone to say if there was a way to turn it into the sensation it was imagined by some to be. But for a talk show, it did provide everyone with something to talk about, laugh about, satire, praise, criticize, debate, respond to, engage, and for some, to watch, support, find comfort in, perhaps find themselves a bit closer to a creator they looked up to. Even if it didn't turn the late night TV world upside down and usher in a new era of YouTuber-led shows, it still gave something to YouTube. And maybe that's all it needed to do. Thank you, and good night. So yeah, that was the video. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all got something from it, and hopefully it inspires some productive discussion. I want to thank the editors. They've once again done a fantastic job. As always, their credits will be in the pinned comment. I want to thank the post editors, Grumpy and Vic Grimes. Fantastic work as always. They really came through after the original post editor had to drop out due to a very, very sad situation. And sending my love to him as well. You know who you are. Thanks again for the background music as well. I assume that'll be Lanuski. I'm not sure yet, but he always does a great job. Thumbnail, as always, Starfo, fantastic work. I'd like to thank my patrons, $10 patrons on the screen now, but I got some $50 patrons to thank as well. Thank you again so much, guys. Seri Tish, Estebadoya, Hypercube, and Laura Woodward. I really appreciate the support and the belief it clearly represents, so thank you for that. Artists, if your artwork appears in this video, the credit should be in the pinned comment, but if it's not, just let me know and I'll add it. I also need to thank the sponsor, Scentbird. As you can tell, it's very hard for me to contain my enthusiasm. I don't really have much else to add, but I once again hope you enjoyed the video, and if you're still here, thank you for listening to me ramble. I'm The Right Opinion, and I will see you in the next one.